Seder. So again, hi everyone. We are continuing the special Web Yeshiva series about the Seder, and today we're going to discuss the Tzafun part. We are almost at the end of our Seder, and I'm going to share the sources I sent you. It's also at the website. Okay. So towards the end of the Seder, we're getting to the Tzafun after we had the table of the food, Shulchan Aruch, and the Tzafun. I'll say it again. What I'm trying to do this shiur is to take the word Tzafun in Hebrew, as you see here, and look for similar words in the Tanakh in order to understand the deep meaning of what does it mean to say Tzafun. Now, the Tzafun part of the Seder is that when we finish, the meal, each of the participants takes an olive-sized piece from the matzah, which was set aside as the afikoman, and eats it while reclining it. And while reclining, it should be eaten before midnight. So the tzafun is actually the part after we finished our meal, and we can't eat anything. We can't have, sweets or a cake or a dessert. All we have after the meal is a piece of the matzah that we called it afikoman. And what we do with the afikoman is what we need to understand, because it says tzafun is what we do to the afikoman. What we did to the afikoman is we put it aside. We hid the afikoman. And why is it so important that the Haggadah is giving a special name to that hiding of the afikoman, putting aside the afikoman that we eat after the great meal? And I'm using the great rule of learning that was first declared by Rav Tzadok HaKohen Milublin. And Rav Tzadok is saying that the great Hasidic commentator from the beginning of the 19th century. And what Rav Tzadok is saying is that in order for us to understand the deep meaning of any word, especially in the Bible, we have to go to the first place where this word was first mentioned, and then try to understand the word at the circumstances, and what is the story surrounding that word. And then we will be able to understand the depth of that word. It's the same thing with people. If we want to understand a figure in the Tanakh, we have to go to the first place where that figure is being mentioned. So this is exactly what I'm looking to do today with the word tzafun, hidden, and try to see where was the first time we hear the root of the word, of a similar word, and try to understand it there. And maybe that will foreshadow and put some light into that word. And what we'll do now is we'll start like a little tour in the entire Bible, looking for similar words from the same root, and try to understand if there's a message first to that word in the Bible, and then with the help of the Midrash, we'll be able to, I think, to have a fuller understanding, a deep understanding. I think one of the core meaning of the entire Seder hidden in this little word. Okay, so that's the word tzafun. And and for those of you who can read the Hebrew and know Hebrew, you see that tzadi pei vav nun that we read as tzafun is also can be read as the word tzafon, which means in Hebrew, north. Tzafon is also north. And this is another thing we'll try to understand. What is it between the word Tzafon, which is north, and the word Tzafun, which is hidden or a secret in Hebrew? Why do they have the same letter? And when I'm looking to see the first place in the Bible where we have something similar to the word Tzafun, we go straight into the book of Bereshit, the story of Yosef and Paro. Yosef, after he helped Paro figure out his dreams, Paro is calling Yosef. He's making him to be second to him in control of the land of Egypt. And it says, and I'm reading the Hebrew, ויקרא פרעה שם יוסף צפנת פענח. ויתן לו את אסנת בת פוטיפר הכהן און לאישה, ויצא יוסף על ארץ מצרים. Pharaoh then gave to Yosef the name Tzafenat Paneach, and Tzafenat Paneach is an Egyptian name for God speaks, He lives, or creator of life. In other words, what's written in this pasuk is that Pharaoh gave Yosef an Egyptian name. The word Tzafenat Paneach in ancient Egypt means creator of life, or God speaks through him. In other words, the one who can solve the riddles and the secrets of the dream. And Paro is giving that dream that name to Yosef, and he gave him for a wife. He gave him a snat, etc. And Yosef emerged in charge of the land of Egypt. In other words, a very surprising founding we have, that the root for tzadi, pei nun, that means tzafun, that means hidden, is coming from an Egyptian name that Paro gave Yosef, Tzafnat Pa'aneach. So the two words that make sense in Egyptian, in ancient Egyptian, to say, he who he who speaks, he who lives, he who knows, how to translate dreams, became the root of the Hebrew words tzafan from tzafnat, hidden, pa'aneach, meaning to figure out. Lefa'aneach is to figure out, to break a code. And the amazing thing is that the Hebrew Bible took those words in Egyptian and made them into words in Hebrew. And we're focusing today, on the word tzafnat, which means to hid. Yosef was able to open the hidden secret of the dream and to tell Paro, what his dream was. And we are now starting to look for the tzafun, for the hidden words of tzafun in the Bible, to try to understand why the hidden of the afikoman, why we had to hide the afikoman, and what is the importance of eating the afikoman after the meal. And we're moving on from Bereshit to Sefer Shmot. And in Sefer Shmot, we have the famous story of Vayelech ish mi beit Levi vayikach et bat Levi. Just pay attention to the fact that we are in the story of Pesach, in the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. One of the last courses we did was learning Sefer Shmot together. And the beginning of the story, I would even say the beginning of the redemption of Pesach, the redemption from Egypt, is that a man from the tribe of Levi took a woman from the tribe of Levi, and the daughter of Levi, and then she had a son, and the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw how beautiful he was, she hid him for 3 months. Now we have to very carefully see that the first tzafun had to do with Egypt, and the second tzafun is also had to do with Egypt, because Yocheved had to hide Moshe in the little ark she made for him, in the little box she made for him. And it didn't say that she lehachbi is also to hide in Hebrew, but then the Bible, the Tanakh, is using the word titzpenehu. She hid him, and lehatspin is not only to hide, but it's to hide a secret, is to hide something that has something in it which is only known to the person who hid it. So the woman bore, Yocheved had a child, had the baby, and that we all know it's Moshe. And she's hiding him from the Egyptians, but the Torah uses the word vatitzpenehu, which is the root of to hide, to closely cover something, because the inside is very dear to us. When we move on in Sefer Shemot, we find that root in a very surprising, but maybe not so surprising place. It says when the Torah describes in Sefer Shemot the building of the tabernacle and the building of the ark, and also other things, but especially the building of the ark, it says the following: V'asu aron, and they made the ark from wood, and it was the length, the height. But then the Torah moves on to say, "V'tzipita oto zahav tahor," and then you cover it with pure gold, mibayit u'mechutz, from inside and outside. Tetzapenu, you will cover it. Overlay it with pure gold, overlay it inside and out, and make upon it a gold molding round about. Now, if you pay attention to this word tetzapenu, we have the Torah is using again the root of tzadipei nun to tell us that the ark itself is made out of wood, but the gold is hiding the wood, because we have to cover the ark with gold from inside the wood and from outside the wood. So if we would look at it, we wouldn't know or wouldn't see the wood. We only see the gold. Now this is a very peculiar thing. It's also the same thing with Mizbeach HaKtoret, where the Torah is telling us that the most important vessels and parts of the tabernacle, beside for the menorah that was pure gold, was made out of wood covered with gold. But the word that the Torah is using is the word vatetzapenu. In other words, you're covering it, but you're covering it to hide it. Again, the word tzafon, as what Yocheved hid the baby, and then she took a box and she hid the baby in the box. But when we talk about the box that holds the Torah, Luchot HaBrit, the ark, it's also that the wood is being hidden by the gold. That is very surprising. We would expect maybe for the wood to hide gold, because gold is more precious, it's more beautiful, it's more expensive. What's the depth of telling us that the ark is made out of wood, and the wood is the secret, that the thing that had to be hidden is the simple material of wood. Now, there are many different beautiful explanations. I'll mention just one that that helped me lead the idea of the Tzafun forward. That I think the Torah is telling us: do not be puzzled by gold, and do not be puzzled or impressed by the outer look, because a person who doesn't know that between the gold there's wood would say, "Oh wow, everything is made out of gold. This is beautiful. This is pure. This is very expensive." But really, what allows the gold, because gold is a soft material, to stand is the wood. In other words, sometimes or many times, it's the simple material, it's the simplicity that let the expensive hold. So therefore, we should never underestimate what's inside of what we see in the outside. If it's true on the ark, it's true on a person. And if it's true on a person, maybe that tzafun in Leil Seder is hiding something which the importance of the thing is not on the outside, but it's in the inside, and we'll have to look further to find out what's the inside secret, what's the inside natural material that we're hiding and that we're seeking in Leil Seder. And I'm moving on from the Pentateuch, from Chamisha Chumshei Torah, to the book of Yeshayahu. Now, I need to say maybe that if we look up the word north, Tzafon, which has the same letters as Tzafun in the Bible, we'll get hundreds of places when we have the word Tzafon north. But there's something about Tzafon as a direction that is also very, very interesting when we come to the prophets. And I brought to you Yeshayahu, and in chapter 14, when Yeshayahu, the prophet Yeshayahu, talks about the king of Babylon. It's a very interesting chapter when the Navi, where Isaiah is describing the narcissism of the king of Babylon, the arrogance of the king of Babylon, who believes he controls the entire world. And there, the prophet, in one of the psukim that he describes the king of Babylon, Isaiah is saying the fourth about the king. ואתה אמרת בלבבך השמיים אעלה. Once you thought in your heart, I will climb to the sky. I will climb to the sky. We found in the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis, with Migdal Bavel. Same thing, Bavel, Babylon, the same idea. Doesn't matter if they lived 1,000 years before or at the time of Yeshayahu. But there's something about, I would say, the monarchy in Babylon that people, and then we see the king, are trying to control the sky and climb to the sky higher than the stars of God. Higher than the stars of God, I will set my throne. Now, higher than the stars of God, I will set my throne. That's what he thinks he's able to do. He's able to. The king of Babylon is telling himself, oh, me? I'm so strong. I'm so important. No one can beat me. I'm the most important person. And I am more than God and more than his servants, like the stars. But the interesting thing is that Rashi is saying, what does that mean? He is, I'm higher than the stars of God. What is it? What are the stars of God? And Rashi is saying, Kochvei El, the stars of God are the people of Israel. So in another word, Rashi is looking at this pasuk and saying it's not literally. It's that the king of Bavel is saying, I know who God's favor, and it's the people of Israel, and I'll be stronger than them, and I will rule them. I love Rashi, but I really do think that the pshat of this pasuk is not talking about the people of Israel. It is talking about the sky and space and the stars and the moon and the sun. And the Babylonian king is saying, oh, me? Who is your God that you think he's mightier than me? I can climb higher than the stars of God, and that is where I will set my throne. I will sit in the mount of the assembly of Tzafun. Now, please pay attention to that word Tzafun. And of course, when you see it in the Hebrew, you will see that it's Tzafon. In other words, there was a god in the pantheon of Akkad and Babylon. The name was Tzafun. So now we have three understanding of the word Tzafun. We have north, and we have hidden, and we also have a name of the assembly of Tzafon is an assembly of the gods who serves the god Tzafon, which is part of the pantheon of Bavel, of Babylon. So as we see, when we open our look at this one little word, that could be a very innocent word, all of a sudden we understand that it's not only about hidden and keeping and hiding and protecting, but it's also and a direction if it's Tzafun, but it's also a name of a God that is telling him that the king of Bavel is telling himself, I belong to sit at the high mountain in the assembly of the king of the god Tzafun, which is considered to be in the highest place. And what we have in the book of Yeshayahu and the book of Yirmiyahu and the book of Yechezkel and on other little prophets in Treasar, we have the usage of the word tzafon both as a direction. I would say it again, mostly as a direction, but not just a direction, but a direction that we have to be aware of, because bad things are coming from north, and the Nevi'im are playing with the words of watch the north as watch the direction of the geographic direction of the north, but also because there in Babylon, which is northern than the land of Israel, a danger can come through the idol worshipping of Tzafon. And there's another in that same chapter of chapter 14, excuse me, or chapter 14, the prophet Isaiah is saying another thing. These are very weird words that is not always understandable. And he says, Heilili shar zaki ir, nemog pleshet kulech ki mitzafon ashan ba. Howl, O gate, cry out, O city, quake, all Philistia, for a stout one is coming from the north, and there is no struggle, and there's no struggler in his ranks. So the prophet Isaiah is telling us that from the north there's a stout, there's some fog, there's some smoke. These are all words for the Hebrew word ashan. There's something very unclear that can block our sight coming from the north. And Rashi, if you see the Rashi is saying כי מצפון עשן בא, פורענויות קשה כעשן תבוא עליהם מצפון. A harsh decrees, catastrophes are coming from the north, and it'll be like having smoke in your eyes, and you wouldn't be able to know what's happening. In other words, we move on with the word Tzafon, which does not only mean coming from north, but the things that are coming from the north are bad things, and they can cover our eyes from seeing. Now there's an amazing game here with something which is hidden, and either I know it's inside, I know it's a wood, or I know it's a baby that is being hidden, or I'm so I so blocked from seeing that I can't see behind it. And the prophet is playing with that, and you should all yell and woe about it, because of that a stout one is coming from the north. When we move to the prophet of Yirmiyahu, and maybe here we should mention the historical shift between Yeshayahu, because Isaiah was a prophet at the beginning of the time of the middle of the time of the first temple that was built by Shlomo, and Yeshayahu was a very established, known prophet in the city of Yerushalayim. And Yirmiyahu is a different story. Yirmiyahu is that simple priest that lived in Anatot outside of Jerusalem, and God is sending him despite his disregard. He didn't want to be a prophet, and God is forcing him, so to speak, to be a prophet. And Yirmiyahu for 40 years, from the time of Yoshiyahu to the time of the destruction of the temple, the last 40 years of the temple and of Jerusalem, Jeremiah is the prophet that goes around and yells and say, You should fix your ways. You should repent. You should stop being corrupted, etc., etc. And at the first chapter, Yirmiyahu Perek Aleph, the first chapter of Jeremiah, after God is telling him, you have no choice because I chose you when you were still, a fetus in your mother's tomb. I decided you're going to be a prophet. And when God started talking to Yirmiyahu about the prophecies that he will bring, and he's telling him about the coming tragedy, the coming destruction, and the exile of the people and the temple. And this is what Yirmiyahu is telling us. It's in the first chapter. וידבר השם אלי שנית לאמור, מה אתה רואה? Almost all of the great prophets, God showed him a symbol and asked them, "What do you see?" And they knew what did that mean. Sometimes he's just telling them, in their dreams, but sometimes it's just a sight that they see. So so God turns to Yirmiyahu and he's telling him, and the word of the Lord came to me in a second time, and he asked me, "What do you see?" And I replied, "סיר נפוח אני רואה ופניו מפני צפונה." I see a steaming pot tipped away from the north. ויאמר Hashem Elai, and then God told me, and the Lord said to me, from the north shall disaster break loose upon all the inhabitants of the land. מצפון תיפתח הרעה became a phrase also in modern Hebrew, that we should be worried from the disaster that would come from break from the north. But again, here we see that Yirmiyahu continues the idea of Yeshayahu in that there's something bad coming from the north. Now, this is definitely geographic because he's talking about the king of Babel that Yeshayahu described from what we saw before, and they come from up north. You can imagine it's Iraq of today, Syria, Lebanon, and then coming down north to the land of Israel. And that's where we all should look to find out that we're not, losing sight from what is going to happen coming from the north. It was a very, very serious thing, and Yirmiyahu understands immediately what he sees and what's the meaning of it. But this was, as we know, Yirmiyahu was the prophet of the destruction. Really have a large amount of chapters talking about the destruction, but it also has one of the most beautiful chapters about the redemption, or about some comfort that will come, Prekei Nechama. And one of the most famous prakim of Jeremiah is chapter 31. Chapter 31 is the chapter that starts with the words, כה אמר השם, מצאכן במדבר עם שרידי חרב. God said, I like the people of the desert, the one who are the remainder of a great war, and I am here to walk them through the desert, to calm them down, to hug them. מרחוק השם נראה לי, ואהבת עולם אהבתיך, על כן משכתיך חסד. So the Lord revealed himself to of old. Eternal love I conceived for you then. Therefore, I continue my grace to you. It's one of the most beautiful love lines that God is telling through the prophet to the people of Israel. I will love you forever. That's why I am, continuing to pour my grace to you and to grant you with my grace. This is already talking about after the destruction, the part of the redemption where the people of Israel will return to the land of Zion. And God is saying, even though I was upset and I punished you, my love to you never ends. And continues the prophet Jeremiah, and he says, כי כה אמר השם, רנו ליעקב שמחה. You should rejoice, and you should be at the head of all the nations. You should sing and praise God and let everyone know how God saved the remaining of Israel. But then came a pasuk in pasuk Zayin, and he says, "Hineni mevi otam me'eretz tzafon." I will bring them from the northland. I will bring them from the northland. The northland, which the disaster is coming from, and we should watch from the Tzafon. And God is saying, this is how they're going to return to the land through the northland and gather them from the end of the earth, the blind and the lame among them, those with child, those in labor, in a vast throng, they shall return here. And this is the beginning of our understanding. It is true. It is true that we have to watch out from the north. But there's also something that the north, that Tzafon is Tzofen, that north is hidden. The north is hidden also the roots of the redemption, the roots of the beginning of the returning to the land, everyone together, and God will bring us all from all the all parts of the world to gather together and be in the land of Israel. And the people that will return from the north, they will cry and they will beg, and I will lead them through water, and I will lead them straight to the land, and they're not going to fall or stumble. Why? Because I'm their father, I'm their parent, and they are my firstborn. In other words, what we see here is also, the healing or the soft part is also coming from the north. The north is also the source of the trouble, and the north is also the source of the war that will occupied the land and exile the part of the Israel part of the land, but then they will return from there, and I will remind everybody, that they are my firstborn. So this is Yirmiyahu who prophesies before prophesies before the destruction, that even after the destruction they will return. But when we move to Ezekiel, it's very interesting as well, because Yechezkel lives in Bavel. He was exiled to Bavel with the king Jehoiachin 11 years before Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the temple and the city. And Yechezkel is prophesying from Bavel, and he sees in front of his eyes both the Jews who are exiled from Jerusalem and are trying to build their life together. He also hears the different groups amongst the people. It's fascinating to read in the book of Ezekiel how some of the Jews said, because of the destruction, that means that God neglected us and we no more are his children, and therefore let's just be Babylonian. Or he will never forgive us, so we just have to stay in exile, be Jewish, but just stay in exile. And there are parts who are saying, no, we have to return to the land of Israel, but there are different voices. Now, when Ezekiel is describing what happened in the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, when he heard about it, and he's also prophesying it, and in his words, when he's trying to explain what just happened there in the land of Israel, he says, "V'hasiboti panai mehem," I will turn myself from them. What happens is that God turned his face from us. And that's why, and my treasures shall be defiled. Ruffians shall invade it and defile it. In other words, what Yechezkel is saying, God has some secrets. I would say differently. God had a treasure in the mikdash, in the temple, and God turned his face from us because the people of Jerusalem were sinners. But then what happened was when God is turning his face from Jerusalem, then the enemies can walk in. But it doesn't have to be also enemies that coming from outside from different nations. It could be also amongst the people who ran the country, the Tzidkiyahu, the king and his household, and the priests who were not so good. And the way that Yechezkel is describing it, what they did, my treasure shall be defiled. And the ruffians shall invade it and defile it. What was hidden there? What was in the treasure of the temple? Look at Rashi. Rashi is saying, חיללו את צפוני, my hid thing, my treasure, את המקום שהייתי צפון שם ביניהם. They defiled the place where I was hidden amongst them. Now we couldn't see God, but we know He was there because we saw the temple and the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies. And what Rashi is using the word Tzafun, like Yocheved was hiding Moshe in the basket. And Rashi is saying, what does it mean to defile my treasure? It's to defile my hidden place amongst them, my dwelling place. They couldn't see me, but they knew I was there. And when they opened the temple for a stranger to move in, they defiled it. So there's nothing there now. So the hidden thing has to do with the treasure of God, which has to be with God's dwelling amongst us. We move to Psalms, and here again we see beautiful, beautiful verses. And again, believe me, if I to bring all the important psukim verses in the Bible with tzafon le'atzpin, it's a lot more. I try to pick points, ones that that are more clear. So Tehillim Perek Kaf Zayin, Tehillim Perek Kaf Zayin is the David Hashem Ori V'ishi, when we say throughout the month of Elul. But there in that chapter, the prophet is saying, Ki yitzpeineni besukko, beyom ra'a yastireni beseter oalo. He will shelter me with his pavilion. On an evil day, grant me with the protection of his tent, raise me high upon a rock. And we have to see all parts of this verse because it's so beautiful. The poet is saying, I know that God will shelter me in his pavilion. But the word in Hebrew is yitzpeneni, shelter, yitzpeneni. I'm the treasure of God. And he's sheltering me in his pavilion. And he will grant me a protection, yastireni, beseter oalo, raise me high upon a rock. Not the king of Babel, but the simple Jew who is pouring his heart to God with prayer and feeling or wanting, it can be a wish or it can be a description of what he feels, that God is protecting me. How he protects me? הוא צופן אותי. He shelters me. And the word tzafun becomes, again, a hidden thing, a secret thing, a treasure, and a shelter. He sheltered me in his pavilion. This is exactly what Yocheved was doing to Moshe. She sheltered him in the box, in the basket. There's something in the Mikdash, there was the shelter of the people of Israel because the dwelling of God was there. There's another perek in Tehillim, perek lamed aleph, another famous perek. מרב טובך אשר צפנת ליראיך, פעלת לכו סימבך נגד בני אדם. how abundant is the good that you have in store for those who fear you, that you do that you do in the full view of men for those who take refuge in you. מרב טובך אשר צפנת ליראיך. There's something, there's abundance of good that God store for the people who fear him, who follow his steps, who follow his words. And the idea that what we can gain from being good people, from following the word of Hashem, of God, God is storing that treasure, that good for us, with the word Tzafanta. Okay? There's a code that we have to break, figure out, to go into the hidden thing. The poet here is saying the code is to be a God-fearing person, to be people who take refuge in you, people who trust you in their life. And and the following pasuk in that same chapter is תסתירם בסתר פניך, מרוכסי איש תצפנם בסוכה מריב לשונות. You grant them the protection of your presence against shaming men. You shelter them in your pavilion for continuous tongues. I'm sure I didn't read that well, but you can read the English. But again, here is the shelter. The people you love, the people that loves you, that love you, you shelter them. But the word is tzafun, that's titzpenim. The next step we're doing in this learning throughout the Bible is another famous chapter in Tehillim, Perek Kuf Yutet. Perek Kuf Yutet in Tehillim is the chapter that has 5 verses on every letter in the alphabet. So in the letter Bet, that they all start with a letter. So in the letter Bet, we hear Belibi tzafanti imratecha. In my heart, I treasure your promise. Therefore, I do not sin against you. We're getting closer to the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Yosef, in the name of Yosef, was hidden something very deep. In the name, the tzafnat פענח that Pharaoh gave him, that became also Hebrew roots, is the secret of Yosef, who was a God-fearing person. But only he could see it. Nobody around him, the Egyptians, could see it because he hid it inside of himself. And then Moshe, who would be the person who will take the people out of Egypt, was also hidden from the eyes of the surrounding. But just his mother and God and his sister knew what's in this basket. And when we hear that there's the Tzafun and the Tzafon and the idol worshipping in the north, there's something bad, and this something bad, it's going to accompany the life of the people of Israel in the land for so many years. But they're little tools, the little hints, the little codes that God is putting in the words of the prophets and the poems and in the Bible, to let us know that what we have inside is precious. And if one part of Psalms talked about God fearing and following God's steps, here the poet is saying, in my heart I treasure your promise. I treasure your promise. It's in my heart. I know you will redeem us one day, even if we can't see it yet, but it's in my heart. Belibi tzafanti imratecha. Therefore, I do not sin against you. And it continues to say, Baruch ata Hashem lamdeni chukecha. Blessed are you, O Lord. Train me in your laws. With my lips I rehearse all the rules you proclaimed. Now, these words, in my opinion, are the words that connect us again to the story of Mitzrayim. Because the main idea of Leil HaSeder is to tell the story again and again, year after year, generation after generation. And the focus of the Seder is the story and the children. And the Seder becomes the time in the year where we shouldn't hide anything. We should just take out everything and say, well, listen, we know Vehi she'amda la'avotenu velanu. It's our belief, it's our trust in God, it's our love in God, it's keeping His treasure in our heart, is the telling of the stories. V'sfatai siparti, look at the Hebrew, siparti, sipur Mitzrayim. In my lips I rehearse and I tell the story. And the telling of the story at the point of the Seder when we get to Tzafun is magical. And I brought a few ideas in order to show you, share with you what I feel about the Tzafun. Now, the book of our heritage explains that the matter of the 15 symbols, that the 15, we call them the words, can קדש ורחץ, כרפס יחץ, מגיד מצה, מגיד רחצה, מוציא מצה, מרור כורך, שולחן עורך. We finish with the shulchan orech, we finish with the meal. Tzafun, barech, halel, nirta. These are 15 words, 15 simanim, signs of the Seder, to make it easier for us to remember what to do. But the Book of Heritage explains that the 15 matters or symbols are against the 15 ma'alot. Now, what are the 15 ma'alot? The 15 ma'alot are the 15 steps of the Levites who stood between Azarat Nashim Azarat Israel Azarat Nashim, and on each step stood a Levi, and they sang songs. Now, if you remember, in the book of Psalms, we have 15 Shirei Ma'alot, the 15 songs of the Ma'alot. Shir LaMa'alot, Shir LaMa'alot, Shir LaMa'alot. Ma'alot in Hebrew are also virtues, but also steps. And the commentators explain that these were the songs that the Levites sang in the temple. So we have 15 symbols in the Haggadah, and we have 15 steps of Shirei Ma'alot, and we also have 15 praises of Dayenu. If you count the Dayenu, you'll see that there are 15 steps. So what Sefer HaTorah is saying is that every symbol, every word of the Seder is against the same number in Dayenu. Now, what belongs to Tzafun? Tzafun is the part of the Dayenu that says, Natan lanu et Shabbat. If all we got from God is the Sabbath, that would be enough. By the way, I think our generation is the generation that understand why Shabbat is enough. Because when the rest of the world is continuing to be busy with all, what do you call them? Computer, phone, TV, etc., all these gadgets and electronic devices, we have quiet. We disconnect ourselves for one day and focus on meaning, on family, on words, on prayer. That's the Sabbath. The Sabbath says it's a tzafun, because the Shabbat was hidden as a treasure by God till He decided to give it to humanity. We remember that Shabbat was one of the things that God created in the beginning of Bereshit, but He kept the Shabbat as a treasure with Him till He gave it to the people of Israel, and from the people of Israel to other people, to other nations, to other religions who picked a different day. But we're trying to do a similar thing. But the Shabbat is tzafun. Shabbat is a treasure. Shabbat is hidden. Now, Shabbat is hidden because we can experience Shabbat without trying to find the inner point, the inner experience. He gave us Shabbat. The Shabbat was hidden with him until he gave it to us. Now, with the 10 minutes that we have left, what I want to try to do is try to break this break the code. What's the tzafun and the secret and the hidden and the treasure that we get when we get to tzafun in the Seder? And I'm going to use it with through two verses in the book, in the song Shir HaShirim, in the Song of Songs. And in chapter 4, the poet is saying, Uri tzafon uvoi teiman. Tzafon v'teiman here are directions, north and south. And he says, awake, O north wind, come, O south wind, blow upon my garden. Very simple, nachon? You know, the winds come and blow upon my garden, that its perfume may spread. Let my beloved come to this garden and enjoy its luscious fruit. So the north is being used as direction. But the other place in Shir HaShirim where the poet is using the tzadi pei nun is in chapter 7 in the following words: הדודאים נתנו ריח ועל פתחנו כל מגדים, חדשים גם ישנים דודי צפנתי לך. So we had the direction, and it's a positive direction. It's not like the direction in the prophets where we have to be aware from the disaster that is going to come from north. This is good. It's wind. It's something that we allow things to grow, and we will spread the good smell around the garden. And in chapter 7, the mandrakes yield their fragrance. At our doors are old choice fruit, both freshly picked and long stored have I kept, my beloved one. Long stored have I kept. In other words, there's something חדשים גם ישנים. It's new and old, but new and old, both freshly picked and long stored have I kept. In other words, there's something I kept for you. Some is old and some is new. And I wanted to connect that to the verse in Sefer Vayikra, the Perek Aleph, in the beginning of Vayikra, describing of the korbanot, and the Torah is saying, "V'shachat oto al yerech hamizbeach tzafona lifnei Hashem." It shall be slaughtered before God on the north side of the altar, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall dash it blood against all sides of the altar. And why is it important for the Torah to tell us exactly the direction of where we had to put the foot of the korban? Why is it, what is it important? What direction? There's a mizbeach, okay, and there's the altar, and you sacrifice. Why do we have to mention the side? And Rashi is saying, לצד המזבח וצד צפון, אין צפון בבמות. Rashi is saying, not only does it say what direction we should put the korban, the sacrifice, on the altar, but we also should know that the bamot the people of Israel were allowed to sacrifice on the altars all around the land of Israel when there was no temple. But immediately after they built the temple, all of a sudden it's important what the direction. In the bamot there was no direction. So the Torah Tmima, explaining Rashi, saying why there's no tzafon, why it's not important what direction you put the sacrifice in the bamot, and the Torah Tmima is saying because there's no dwelling of the Shekhinah in the bamot. God is dwelling only in the temple, and when we slaughter, we need to do it lifnei Hashem. In other words, because God is there, the tzafon is important, north is important. And to understand that, I brought you this beautiful, beautiful midrash that puts everything together. And let's see what it says. ושחט את בן הבקר צפונה לפני השם, okay, on the north in front of God or before God. And they said, בשעה שעקד אברהם אבינו את יצחק בנו, when Abraham brought Yitzchak to sacrifice, God gave him two kvasim, two sheep, one for the morning and one for night. Why? שבשעה שהיו ישראל מקריבים, why did he give him two sheep? It's for the future. שבשעה שהיו ישראל מקריבים תמיד, because when the people of Israel would sacrifice on the altar, and we'll read that verse meaning the Akedah, the sacrificing of Yitzchak, צפונה לפני השם, and they read it north in front of God. God will remember Akedat Yitzchak. God will remember the sacrificing of Yitzchak. In other words, there's something about the words Tzafona lifnei Hashem at the north in front of God or before God that will remind God about the Akedah, and therefore the people will be forgiven. And the Midrash is saying, Me'idani alai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. I promise you, Shamayim, I swear, Shamayim ve'aretz, Goy ve'Yisrael, Ish ve'isha, Eved ve'ama. It doesn't matter who will say those words, Tzafona lifnei Hashem. It could be a Gentile, or it could be an Israelite. It could be a man or a woman. It could be a slave or a maiden. Anyone קוראים את המקרא הזה צפונה לפני השם, God will remember עקדת יצחק. Why? צפונה לפני השם. Why is it לפני השם? Because לפני השם is a code word for a person that is willing to sacrifice himself in front of God or to do the ultimate things in front of God. But דבר אחר, and that's where we get to our idea, צפונה לפני השם כנגד מעשיהם של אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, שהם צפונים לפניו. No, you didn't understand, says the Midrash. When it says צפונה לפני השם, נכון, it's north. But what it comes to say is צפון, hidden. When you do this, there's something hidden in what you're doing that reminds God the ultimate sacrifice, and therefore he'll forgive you. Because he hid Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov in front of him, and they're there, and they're jumping in front of him whenever there's a need for some mercy on the people of Israel. ומניין שהלשון הזה הוא לשון צפונה, and how do you understand what? And the Midrash is confused. I don't understand. The word is tzafona, north. Why do you tell me that tzafona is hidden? Where do you find this connection? And they quote the psukim we read in Shir HaShirim, the verses we read in Shir HaShirim, שנאמר, חדשים גם ישנים דודי צפנתי לך. Yes, the lover in the Song of Songs is saying that new and old I will keep, I will treasure, I will hold, I will hide for you. And the Midrash is saying, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב ישנים, עמרן בן קהת וכל הכשרים שהיו במצרים חדשים. In every generation, you have the old generation and the new generation. אברהם, יצחק ויעקב are old, and Amram, the son of the father of Moshe, is new. But again, חדשים גם ישנים, חבורתו של משה וחבורתו של יהושע, ודוד וחזקיה are old. Moshe, Yoshua, David, and Chizkiah are old. And who are the new ones? Ezra veHillel ורבן יוחנן בן זכאי ורבי מאיר וחבריו. The new generation is the Chachamim. ועליהם הוא אומר חדשים גם ישנים. In other words, what is this pasuk is saying? This pasuk is telling us that the idea of the Midrash is telling us about the Tzafun, which is north, but it's also a secret and it's also hidden. Let me just go back that you'll see this again. And it's all the hidden. That all comes from Yosef. That there's things that we do that the power, the energy that we have in order to do it right, or that we have to connect to is not just what we do now, but also where it came from. But if every generation has new blood, new power, new koach, new a leadership to show us the way, and it can be also ourselves learning, understanding, bring forward, the connection that we have to the past and the future through us. And the amazing thing is that the people, the Tzafun, which is the hidden afikoman, is giving to the children to look for it. We're taking a hidden thing and we hide it from the children, and they have to look for it. Why? Because we have to teach them that there's a secret. There's a hidden thing in the belief in each and every one of us. And the power of this treasure lies in the hands of the children, because they are the future. One day we're going to be the old, and they're going to be the new. Like once we were the new, and then our forefathers were the old. But this is the power of the tradition that is being passed from generation to generation, specifically through children, because they're innocent, because they're wonderfully creative, because they ask questions, because they will understand that if this matzah is so important to hide and to find, and then we're eating it and we finish the Seder with eating it, there's something about this matzah. And then we can explain to them what this matzah was. And we're wishing that, like we were children, I don't know if anyone liked to hide or to find, but we were children, and that's what we're passing. We're passing to our children. We're passing to our children the hidden code of the faith. The young generation, which is today new, they're going to be the leaders. They're going to be the leaders of tomorrow, and maybe even more to say that redemption is also now, right now, and our children are the most fresh, most authentic beings listening to this and helping us to maybe sometimes for one day, or maybe it can last for a few days, or maybe it can last for longer, but understand the treasure that we have within us, within the set, that within the people we're sitting amongst, and with the children. And because and through the children we get to eat the afikoman, because the afikoman is the last part of the Seder. But it's the Haggadah didn't call it afikoman. The Haggadah called it Tzafun, hidden, treasure, secret, sheltered. All these verses that we read in order to understand that this is what we do in the night of the Seder. We pass on the tradition, we pass on the story, we pass on the code of the secret of the belief, or the meeting of the spirit, and the meeting of the spirit and the body through eating, but also through remembering that there's a treasure of God to be found through the story, and through helping the kids find that hidden thing. And with that, I will end. I'm sorry that it took longer, and I wish you all Chag Sameach וכשר, we'll see you after the Chag, בעזרת השם.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful. תודה רבה.
תודה, שרה. תודה רבה. ביי, אדם. ביי.